More important than me is Professor Babak, of course. Our presenter today is a professor of marketing at Nottingham Trent University and has held a number of academic and research leadership positions in the past. You were in Edinburgh, right, Babak, before this?
Yeah, I was in Heriot-Watt University.
Yeah. Okay. He's also an honorary professor of marketing in business school at University of Aberdeen. He has an established reputation of the marketing field with specific expertise in service marketing management, consumer behavior and tourism, leisure and cultural consumption. The innovative nature of his research traces to multidisciplinary work and to methodologically robust management and assessment of key concepts. And you have an engineering background, right?
Yes,
Baba?
industrial engineering, yes.
I see. That's
and computing science.
I see, yeah, okay. He has published consistently in internationally rated top-tier journals with high impact factors. We already know that, hundreds of publications, and held funds from bodies in the EU and UK, such as Horizon 2020 and Innovative UK research grants. He currently serves as senior editor of Tourism Management Perspectives, which is another success story. An associate editor for the Service Industries Journal and International Journal of Contemporary Hospitality Management. He also is on the editorial review board of several social science journals, including the Journal of Business Research and Journal of Travel Research. Okay, welcome again, Babak. Any questions are left to the question and answer session at the end of the presentation. You can also write your questions to the chat. We will go through the chat after Babak completes his presentation. It's over to you, Babak.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm just gonna share my screen. I'll just take it out from. Can you see it with my notes or is just? Yeah, good. No, hold on. Yeah. So good morning and good afternoon, everyone. This is a session about scale development and validation. This is something I'm very interested myself on presenting this. Back several years ago, 100 years ago, when I was a PhD student, my PhD was about the scale development. So I become more interested on the scale development process and validation. I published quite a lot of paper on scale development in the last couple of years. And the concept of scale development and the process of scale development become quite interested for me. And I have seen the evaluation of the scale development in the last couple of years. Currently, we are editing a special issue on scale development in Journal of Business Research with Albert Asaf and Samir Hassani from Albert from US and Samir from London. And this is again another interest of me, and also Samir was interested in scale development and being like that. So without further ado, I just start explaining, and I cannot cover everything in 1 hour, less than 1 hour, 45 minutes, but I try to give you a glance and flavor of what is the scale development and importance of the scale development. Basically, when we talk about scale development, in quantitatively, we want to capture the abstract concepts. But these abstract concepts should be sort of supported by overarching theories from the field. And also, it's about accuracy, it's not about truthfulness of the measurements. And it depends on the concept you find in a social sciences, marketing, and I'm just talking about marketing and tourism, which is my field. And in these kind of, the fields is Sometimes you have a multi-dimensional concept. For example, you might have a different sort of motivation, for example, hedonic and utilitarian. So then you have two subcomponents of a one concept. So these are very important to understand what you capture in, what you measure in quantitatively, but also the theory and the justification behind this before applying the scale development. And why scale development? Again, is there any scale? You're always looking at, is there any scale measuring potential concept? If there is no scale, then there's, oh, that's an interesting way of actually trying to define and capture a particular concept. Why do you need the new scale? Sometimes some scales are dated, and over a time you want to update those scales because the things were happening in the 70s is not applicable anymore in 2022. So you need to think about, again, about dimensionality. Very important, is a mono or a multiple dimensions. What are the potential applications of these? So is this application is going to be in tourism? Is it going to be marketing? Is it going to be in HR? Which kind of field is going to be applied? So that's very important to know as well. And it's about a further validation. Again, sometimes is some scale developed several years ago, and you want to further evaluate and further develop the concept. Normally, there are different steps to follow for the scale development. And I'm just giving you some of them. I gathered over the years, these 5 steps are the best way forward. But again, this is just my idea. And several of my friends, we like to take the scale development through these 5 steps. So as I said, it's just my approach. And my friends and other colleagues might have different view on this, but this is the most common one when you're applying for the scale development. So I go through each of the steps, explain a little bit more about what are these steps is about and why we need these steps. So step 1, domain definition, a careful examination of the literature. So again, I don't know how many times I highlight it, and I'm gonna highlight today. You need to understand your literature before defining something. You're applying something quantitatively, and you describing and measuring something quantitatively. Is it a specific or general? Again, you need to think about that. Theoretical definitions is important, and also is important to think about what do you want to measure. So it is, again, that's very important as well. What included in a construct and what excluded in a construct. Again, it goes back to the defining that. The literature, I like this Churchill's quite old quote, but I really like this. It says, define previously. The variable has been defined previously and how many dimensions or component it has. So that is very important going back to literature. So step 2, so you define that, and now in step 2, you want to do item generation. So what happens with item generation steps? It could be deductive or inductive approach you use. So deductive approach is item is based on existing theory. So existing theory, and from that theory, you clearly know there should be 3 dimensions of a concept. But sometimes you need to have inductive approach here as well to develop it based on an experience. So sometimes I did this in the past. I look at a concept of, which I explain later, of ceremonious politeness, published in a scale development paper. And in that one, it wasn't any concrete sort of literature on this. So I need to dig in more to define this. And the hybrid process is becoming more and more dominant these days. So deductive way, you know the dimensionality from the previous studies, but you want to add a new flavor for that. As I said, deductives are usually recommended because there is a good amount of literature to support these dimensions. And we want to publish our papers, and you get less criticism by doing the deductive approach normally. Because most of our reviewers are in a deductive side of the equation, if you like. So examples of these defined is just an example I'm giving. The scale to measure responses people to drink of alcohol. Alcohol drinking motivation. So this is a motivation. If you look at the theory of socialization, relaxation, and coping, it says there should be 3 different dimensions of that. So items for the socialization, you do some research, and is when you drink alcohol is usually in order to have a fun with your friends. So socialization concept comes. Coping situation again is a bad day. You want to change your mood, and relaxation it makes you calm. So all these things it becomes important for you. And also, so this is the way you start to develop a pool of items. So basically, the literature says something about socialization, relaxation, and coping, and you define each of these based on the items you have. The next thing is when you're developing this item generation, some tips I want to give. That is a very important one. Focus on a single issue, not double barrel. That is very American way of saying something. It's not one thing has 2 meanings. So that's very important. So I drink alcohol to have fun and to socialize. That is not a good way of doing it, because each item needs to capture a sense of something, not 2. Consistent perspective. My friends have fun when drink alcohol together. Ooh, long sentence. That is confusing your audience. Simple, short items. Again, this is a very long one. When I am same age peers, I tend to consume beverage that contains ethanol in order to reach a point of relaxation. Maybe this is other one is better. When I am with my friends, I usually end up getting drunk. So the same thing, but is the way people understand it. Avoid the negative and reverse scored items. I usually don't drink when I am upset. This is not a good approach when you do the scale development. Later on, you could do reverse coding, but it's not recommended, because you really, really want, when you do the scale development, to know people understanding all the items, because this is not a long survey. It's going to be very short survey. And the last bit, this conference is an international conference, a good point. It needs to make sense in other cultures and languages. So be careful of the wording you use. Even sometimes between the British and American English, there are differences. In the conferences in Turkey, between the Turkish and Azerbaijani Turkish, there are differences, and people can make a joke even about it if you write in the wrong way. So you need to think about all these cultural aspects when you applying this scale development item generation part. And what you do. So we know all these tips, and it's interesting, but what actually we doing in the first item generation one? We're doing content validity. So after the pool of item is generated, you have those pool of items, you do the interview to find, and focus group, you apply interviews. Sometimes you apply Delphi, because there are lots of items might come up, might be like 50 items. And after the panel rating, or Delphi, some people use it, you start asking a panel of judge to look at your items and start scoring them. And based on that, you reduce that 50 to 20. So that is the way you're doing. Otherwise, you cannot ask 50 items to people. You're going to get lots of missing data, and it's going to be another pain on top of the research we're already doing. So I really recommend you to, this is the way you need to go forward. Yes, the last one I already mentioned about it. So that is the first one. So the first step was about domain definition, so basic literature review. The item generation step was about, you have from the literature, you have lots of items, you do interviews with the people, you do the focus group with the people, and then you do Delphi or a panel of experts to reduce the number of items. But after doing that, those are so far being all qualitative or semi-qualitative way of doing it. But step 3 is basically doing item reduction. This is like you actually start putting, you do the survey and put your data in SPSS and similar softwares. This is one of my favorite. When you start doing survey, think about it. Don't start asking random people in the street and people, they don't understand your answer. You need to really think about all those items. So be careful who you're approaching for your survey and why you're approaching these people. Questionnaire administration, I know a lot of you guys know already this, but I really want to cover this again here. Develop a simple and clear direction from the beginning. Why this survey? And give maybe a little bit of, if you like, the definition or sort of a short introduction for your survey. Keep a direction as brief as possible, but keep that direction you're giving very brief. Highlight the time frame. Is like alcohol consumption last 30 days. And in services marketing, the common approach when you want to ask about somebody's consumption experience, it needs to be less than 6 months. That's a very common approach and has been used in Journal of Service Research and of marketing, big marketing and services journals. So it's better to use a less than 6 months when you want to ask somebody's experience about a particular consumption. Population and interest, you need to target that. The theory should detect the variables. New measures should correlate to be independent, so it's very important. Normally adequate for sample size for this stage is plus 200. You can have it less than that, but the journals these days really want to see more than 200 for the item reduction stage. And you do it before doing that 201, you do a small pilot testing as well. And also think about, I'm not going to cover this, but also think about social desirability and common method bias issues. So when you're asking people, some of them, like when you're asking people about the same survey, don't put them in the same room from, side by side, because that is one of the issues with the common method biases. Put the dependent and independent variable in different parts of the survey. Again, that is another way of doing it. Use a Harman method of the, doing the testing for common method bias and other methods as well. So these are very important ones. You need to think about it. Yes. So after doing the factor analysis, now you need to do the next step. So the step 3 was about doing the factor analysis. Now you do the confirmatory factor analysis. So when you do the confirmatory factor analysis in step 4, you want to look at the structure of your data. So basically, coping, relaxation, and sociality. Now you want to see if these things are correlated with each other. So that's the way you do the confirmatory factor analysis, because you want to see you have these items from your factor analysis now if they are correlated or not. And also when you do the exploratory factor analysis, it should be lack of goodness of fits indices, all these things. You need to think about those goodness fits as well. And this is the one is quite important when looking at the characteristics of this goodness of fits, chi-square, TLF, RNR, SMR, and based on the sample size, and you might have a different tests you use. and M is number of observed variables. Based on that, you might have a different goodness of fit in this table. But this is taken from Hare's book, and it's really important to follow these steps. The other thing you need to do here is invariance test. This is something that becomes more and more these days. Basically, if you want to see the differences between the groups. And basically what you do after getting your data, you start doing chi-square or t-test, basically between the items, the variables, and also gender and age. So we want to see the differences, if there is no significant differences between the groups. So that's the other thing you need to think about it. Discriminant validity and all these things is another thing you need to cover. Convergent validity, nomenological validity, and all these things you guys know, so you don't need me to explain to you. I escaped that, as you guys know, and I'm conscious of time here. Meta-analytic approach, that is another thing. These days is becoming more and more, and that's like external validity point. When you start doing, so basically we have these three components for the alcohol consumption motivation, I said. Now you want to all these items correlated with a global item, some people call it. Alcohol drinking motivation. All those items, they need to capture something. And you normally have an extra item in your survey. Drinking alcohol helps me to cope, relax, and socialize. And then each of those components, you had one for socialization, one for relaxation, one for the coping. You start correlating all those constructs with one item construct, all the items within that construct with these particular items. Drinking alcohol helped me to cope. So because you want to see is externally validated, that's the best way forward. And one's paper is very good for this. I really recommend you guys to read that for the meta-analytic approach. Final step of, so I'm just capturing what we did so far. So domain definitions, that was the literature review we did. Item generation, we did a qualitative one. So we did the focus group interviews about a particular concept. And then we had a panel of experts, or Delphi approach we used, so reducing the items. And then we did a factor analysis. Again, by using factor analysis, we start reducing even further with that. And then in initial validation, which we did the initial validation with the sample. And then based on that, we start, to do the complementary factor analysis with the items. And that is the final validation part. Some people call retest reliability as well. So the final validity one is scale validate and reliable. Then never till you try it in another concept. Or some people, they use a test retest to divide the final survey you had for your step 4, previous step, and you use some of that for step 4 and some of that for step 5. But some journals are really against this. So it's better to try this in another concept. So I normally, for step 4, I collect the data with a particular country, and step 5, I collect them from another country to reduce that. So how are we doing so far? Any questions before I go to one or couple of examples? I'm gonna go through them. Questions? Okay, I leave the questions for the end. Just explain some of the examples here we have. So 2 examples I took. I know these 2 editors are in the conference, Levent and Fevzi Hocam. So I picked the papers are published in their journals. One is in the National Journal of Contemporary Hospitality Management, another one in the Service Industries Journal. And then as associate editor, I need to promote their journals as well. So both of them, I'll explain them how I capture these two constructs, develop these two constructs. The first one, ceremonious politeness. Okay, what does ceremonious politeness means to you? Yes, Girozo. You're mute. You're still mute. Sorry.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, the participants are not allowed to talk while you talk.
I didn't know that.
They are all unmuted. Yes.
All right. Okay. I didn't know that.
So this is why we better have the questions.
All right, at the end. Right. I didn't know that. Thank you for
sure.
Thank you. Right. So basically, ceremonious politeness is a very cultural thing. I'm originally from Iran, and in my culture, if you go to somebody's home and they offer you food, you like it or not, you're going to eat it because you want to be polite to your host. So that's ceremonious politeness, when you actually trying to be polite to your host. So for this particular paper, we followed this step. This is something I actually always try to draw in my papers on scale development, to demonstrate visually how this scale development captured in my study. So the study one is interviews we did for phase 1 and 2, that same steps I explained. So it was a literature review, and after that we did a study 1, which was interviews of female and male, and then we with diverse background, and and then we asked a panel of experts, 20 people, to rank these. So that was a step 1 and 2. Phase 3, we did a survey of 210 university students using a UK representative sample. And again, we did all the reliability, validity, all these fancy statistical tests. Next step was phase 4. We used the people visitors using Iranian representative sample. Before even doing that, we did a pilot of 50. So we did collect the 673 sample for the phase 4 for doing initial validity. For this initial validity one, I will explain next in the next slide a model, and you will see how you do normally. And then we did a replication one sample of the Chinese, the same way with the Iranian one with the sample of Chinese. So that's the way I normally represent, demonstrate my scale development one. So here, if you see the ceremonious politeness in the middle, showing good manners to please others, but because you want to do basically the validity test, you normally need to have some other construct to you see if something is influencing ceremonious politeness and something actually is outcome of this interaction. And because I'm a marketing person, I always go with interaction, consumption, and engagement. I'm sure HR people, they use different terms, but I like to use that terms. And in this particular example, for the phase, just back again, phase 4 and phase 5, we did the same test with this model. So people, they have different accountability. There's very personal things they have about the consumption behavior, eating behavior, and also the social things. Other people's behavior is influencing their behavior. And the concept for me, I use a blame theory here for capturing this model. If you go somebody's home and you eat it, you consciously, you're gonna eat there, but also is influencing other people's opinions, influencing your behavior. And then you're gonna say, oh, well, why I eat like a pig when after going there? Because I didn't even like it, but I eat a lot. So that is something you normally need to think about it. So that's the way we capture. And these are the items. I'm not good at saying no. I feel they have put effort in their preparing the service. I put myself in their shoes. All these things happens with the ceremonious politeness. The next one about measuring the sincerity in hospitality and tourism. So again, host sincerity, authenticity, and different dimension of authenticity has been captured in hospitality and tourism over the years. But nobody captured host sincerity. That is something, when I did a couple of papers about about authenticity, I realized nobody capturing this. But what is host sincerity? I explained that in this slide. So I define host sincerity as basically, if you read these, is about, when you talk about authenticity, authenticity is about objects. So object need to be authentic. But what about the people? When you go to tourist attractions or some restaurants and stuff, how do you feel all those hosts, people in restaurant are actually being authentic? So people being authentic is about host sincerity. So that is the one I want to capture. Again, as you see, as a familiar with you guys now, the way I demonstrate this. So I did a literature review, I did an interview of 43 people, we did a Delphi again, we did a survey of, again, British student sample we used. And this is something, guys, is becoming more criticism about using student sample in some journals. So you need to be careful. I get on with it, probably because my main study I used in phase 3 and phase 4, I used actual data, right? And for that reason, I get with this without any issue. But if it's only based on the student sample, you're going to have a problem publishing a good journals. And this first sample I used Kandavan, and next one I used Cappadocia. Now you guys on Turkey, I don't know if you have a time or not. Cappadocia is one of the beautiful places you need to visit. This is the place you need to go, and in that what you will see is a basic volcanic sort of cave style places, and you see lots of hotels developed there. Is beautiful, but also, same one, Kandavan in Iran has the same thing, exactly similar to Cappadocia. So that places, because when you go inside Cappadocia or Kandavan, those people selling your product or you staying with them, they need to be sincere with you. So that is why I find it the best place actually measuring host sincerity in this. And I use, again, for the step phase for the Kandavan example and for Cappadocia example, I use this model. There is a model in hospitality and tourism called consumer-based model of authenticity, which is always talks about motivation is influencing object-based authenticity and existential authenticity, and there is a outcome here, memorable tourism experience. So there was already a conceptual model. I only add the host sincerity for capturing Cappadocia and Kandavan's basically this construct validity and reliability. And these are there was a two-dimensional item, sincere social interaction, sincere emotional response. And we use this after doing all those steps, we capture these items and now it's published. We don't have a time for this. The next thing is about formative and index development. So there is one index, for example, medical tourism one, in tourism management published, and has a similar sometime, but it's different steps, particularly when it comes to validity and reliability. And the formative measure is another one. So far, all these other steps I said about was about reflective measure, but for formative measure, you can use this is the first paper I published. This is actually my PhD, keeping audience present in visitor engagement. I published a long time ago in 2014, and that was a formative measure scale development. So again, you could look at the steps as followed there, but it's more different steps, and you might find it interesting. The final remark is, I don't know how many times I mentioned today and highlighted, literature review is the most important part of doing the scale development. You have a good concrete literature review, and you also in that literature review, you are sort of defining and also highlighting the importance and why we need this scale. Then you could start following this scale development steps. Different steps, including different samples. You need to explain everything to your readers. Don't try to be smart and skip some of these steps. Reviewers is gonna pick on that. If your reviewer is me, I'm gonna pick on everything. No, I'm joking. But it's important to follow a good structure. And some consistency, that's very important as well. And last question you need to ask, do I really need to develop a new skill, and why? Before you start going through all these pain, because it's going to be 5, 6 different studies, you need to justify to yourself with your literature, and also maybe a chat with the colleagues to see, do you really need to have a new skill? So that's very important. Two very well-known books for scale development. So if you want to do a scale development, please buy these 2 books. I like Devil's book because it's simpler, is more, but the Netmeyer book is more technical if you want to do a technical one. So there are some references here for you guys to look at it, and that's me. Thank you. Any question, comment? Gonna stop sharing.
Well, thank you, Babak. Well, there are some at the chat, I guess, and to the audience, if you have any questions, you can write them down to the chat while we are answering those questions. I guess Uğur Yeşillili has one. If you want to change items from negative to positive, how does this affect the research? I guess he's trying to take a scale from somewhere, but there are some reverse coded items, and his main question is, what happens if I change these negative statements to positive ones? Does it affect the reliability of the research?
Well, you really need to think about why you want to do that. What can you? I don't know if this person can talk and explain. I wasn't sure. What is this question? Is it a scale is already exists and you want to take it from there, or is it something? I'm not clear about your question.
Well, I think there is a scale and he's willing to use it, but there are some reverse coded questions.
It's not about the scale development. Somebody wants to use that scale. I see the question.
I guess
that's
so.
fine. That's fine. You just take it. The steps I was explaining was about scale development process. For that, if you want to borrow somebody's scale and just apply it in your model, a conceptual model or something, that's absolutely fine. Because I always do that as well. I like to have some negative scoring when I have a particular long survey. So if you have a psychologist here, can explain a lot more about this, because you want to stop people zigzag sort of answering in your survey.
Yeah. Well, too much of it is a bit challenging to fill, though, and it's a bit confusing for the respondent as well. So I don't think that if there is too much of a negative statements or reverse coded questions, then it becomes too complex to process for the respondent. Yeah.
But it's some extent, as I said, it's like if it's, I'm just saying, hypothetical, you have a survey of 100 items. Maybe in that one, you could have 4 or 5 negative items. But if you have a survey of 25 items and 15 of them are negative, maybe that's not a good approach.
Yeah, there are such skills. Yeah. Anyway.
Any other questions, guys?
Any other questions? Not in the chat. And let me ask another question. I always mix this reflective and formative type of skills. What is the real difference in a simple way?
The real difference is the reflective measures. Basically, statistically, there is basically you want the formative one are like index. Without having all those items, the concept doesn't mean anything. But the reflective one, you have, let's say, 10 items, and you could drop them after statistically testing them. Some of them might have a lower loading because it goes with the loading approach. But the formative one, another things is, as I said, is like human sort of index. For capturing human index, you need to have educations and all those things. You cannot have a human index without having an education item, for example. So you see that is holistically, it needs to be like that. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. So you cannot just remove those dimensions, in the formative one. Okay.
Right.
Anything else? I don't think so. Well, that's it, I guess, Babak.
That's fantastic. As I said, if we had a longer day, we could have maybe a workshop, and I could sit there, and you have we could go run some SPSS and all those things, and it would make more sense, some of these. As I said, it's like a glance of what is going on with the scale development. And please read some of the papers published, particularly the new papers are very good. Last 5 years, Journal of Business Research has quite good scale development papers. It's one of the good journals for that. And also Journal of Marketing start after years again back to publishing scale development ones. And in Journal of Marketing, this is something just for wrapping up this session. In Journal of Marketing, they start for the last validation, which I was saying phase 5, instead of other they use other culture, but also start using it as experiment. So applying it in experiment, not like a self-reported.
Just leaving,
Yes. So that's a Journal of Marketing approach for this, and that's because it's new. I haven't seen in other journals. It's just a Journal of Marketing is doing that now.
Yeah. Okay, and there will be a special issue at Journal of Business Research. Yeah. So, and this will be also recorded. This is already recorded, and will be broadcasted in YouTube. I guess it will be there. So if anyone wants to re-watch the video or presentation, and it will be on YouTube channel of Metcon, I guess. Well, thank you again.
You're very welcome. And if you have any questions, you can always drop me email in Nottingham Trent to my Nottingham Trent email address as well.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you very much for your time.
Enjoy. And sorry, I haven't been there. I really like to be there in Turkey and have a nice some kebab, and Gürül Hoca always promises me lots of kebab, but never I had it from Gürül Hoca. Well, next time, Gürül Hoca.
Next time in Istanbul, hopefully, yeah. Okay.
Have a lovely day, guys. Cheers.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye.
Gürel Hocam.
Evet.
Duyuyor musunuz?
Duyuyorum.
Evet, teşekkür ediyoruz.
Biz teşekkür ederiz.
Bir sonraki oturumumuz saat 5'te başlayacaktır.
Onu da söyleyeyim.
Dr. Fayzan Ali ile Smart PLS eğitimi.
The next workshop will be at 5 o'clock local time, Turkish time. It will be on Smart PLS by another famous and competent scholar, Dr. Faizen Ali. You are most welcome to join that as well. Thanks again for being here.